Hi, I'm Andrew Torget with Texas History for Teachers. The early 1900s was a period of incredible change in Texas. In 1901, drillers discovered a massive pocket of oil in East Texas, setting off a wild new era of boom towns and oil derricks that transformed the state. During the 30 years that followed, people flooded into Texas, moving into new towns and cities where there were all kinds of new technologies like electric lights, vacuums, washing machines, movie theaters, and cars that all suddenly seemed to be everywhere. And for a lot of Texans, these were truly exciting times. But at the same time, there were many other Texans who struggled during these early decades of the 1900s. A lot of farmers in Texas, for example, lost their homes because they couldn't make enough money to pay for their land. The state legislature passed new laws that made it nearly impossible for many people, especially people of color, to vote in elections. And there was a lot of violence during this time, much of it directed against Mexican Americans and African Americans. So, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how and why did life in Texas change so much between 1900 and 1930? Well, let's start with one of the biggest events of the period, the discovery of oil. Now, Texans had long known that there was at least a little bit of oil under the ground, going all the way back to the earliest American Indian tribes in the region. But for the longest time, no one had any good use for that oil, and absolutely no one had any idea that there was so much of it buried in Texas. But then, during the 1880s and 1890s, oil suddenly became big business in the United States, which, as you can imagine, set people off searching for oil in all directions. A few of those people started looking in Texas. And on January 10th, 1901, a group in Jefferson County drilled into the ground at a place called Spindletop that would become famous for what happened next. You see, when the drill bit at Spindletop got all the way down to 1,139 feet, the ground suddenly began to rumble. And then, boom! They had hit a massive pocket of oil and gas, bigger than anything ever seen before. And the released pressure was so great that it shot 6 tons of drilling equipment straight up into the air. That explosion was immediately followed then by a massive stream of oil that flew 100 feet into the sky as oil began gushing out at a rate of 100,000 barrels a day. Oil had officially been discovered in Texas, and that would change the state forever. People began pouring into Texas in hopes of striking it rich by striking oil, and soon there were wells pretty much everywhere. Before Spindletop, Texas had produced only about 1,000 barrels of oil every year. But in 1902, the first year after Spindletop, the state produced more than 21 million barrels of oil, and it would only just go up from there. Now, the rush to find oil then helped lead to another really big change, the rapid growth of cities in Texas. With every new oil strike came a flood of people into the state, which often led to the creation of new towns. When oil was discovered near Breckenridge, Texas, for example, the local population shot up from 800 people to more than 30,000 in just a single year. And it wasn't just oil men going into these towns. Some of the people moving there were farmers who had long been struggling in Texas and hoped for new opportunities in places like Dallas or Houston or Austin. And some were young people, young women in particular, who often moved to cities in search of new opportunities and the excitement of having movie theaters and cars on every street. And with so much change going on, a new movement emerged during these years called progressivism, which was all about passing laws and regulations to improve the lives of people in Texas. Some of these progressives wanted to clean up cities and make them more comfortable places to live. Others wanted to make it easier for farmers to make a living and keep their land. And still others wanted to do things like outlaw alcohol, which progressives thought caused a lot of problems in society. Now, one of the great successes of the progressives was securing women the right to vote. Women had been fighting for this since the 1800s, but it was during the 19-teens when many women in Texas, like Minnie Fisher Cunningham and Mary Eleanor Brackenridge, bravely stepped forward to help lead the fight for empowering women. And they succeeded. In 1918, a woman named Annie Webb Blanton was elected State Superintendent of Public Instruction, which made her the very first woman ever to hold statewide office in Texas. Just 1 year later, Texas became the first Southern state to ratify the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which officially gave women the right to vote nationwide. And in 1924, Texas even elected its first female governor, Miriam Ferguson. But at the same time that all these advances were happening, there were also a lot of really scary things happening too. The early 1900s was the period when the systems of Jim Crow and segregation became really powerful in Texas. The Texas legislature passed laws, for example, that forbid people of color from using the same bathrooms or drinking fountains or public spaces as white people. All public schools in Texas were separated by race, which meant that it was illegal for Mexican American and African American kids to go to the same schools as white kids during these years. And the state government passed many other laws, like the poll tax in 1902, that were specifically designed to prevent African Americans and Mexican Americans from voting. People of color who dared to challenge these laws were sometimes attacked, often violently. It was, in other words, a period of tremendous upheaval and change, some of it for the better and some of it for the worse, all of which seemed to be happening at the same time. And there were even two massive wars that took place during these years, World War I and the Mexican Revolution, that each helped to remake the state even more. So the question that we are left with is, how did all of these remarkable changes shape and reshape the state in such powerful ways by 1930? And what would that mean for Texans as they stood on the edge of one of the greatest challenges in the state's history, the Great Depression?